You know, it's funny how we think about places in stories. A lot of the time, they're just the backdrop, right? But what if a place could be more than that? What if it could be a character in its own right, shaping everything that happens? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today with the Galilee. We're going to see how its crazy, violent history, its one of a kind geography, and its clashing cultures didn't just host a world changing story, they actually helped write it. Okay, let's get into it. So, our journey really kicks off with a prophecy. Hundreds of years before any of the Gospels, the prophet Isaiah wrote these, well, hunting words. He talked about a land just soaked in darkness, a land of the shadow of death. But then he talks about a great light. That land he was talking about, that was the Galilee. And this tension, this clash between shadow and light, that is the absolute key to understanding this whole story. And that leads us to the big question for today, right? How did this specific, really turbulent piece of the world become the stage for a message about radical peace and hope? To even start to get an answer, we've got to look at the land itself. Yeah, you have to understand long before any great light showed up, the Galilee was basically defined by darkness and conflict. I mean, look at this timeline. In 722 BC, the Assyrians come in, exile the northern tribes, and move a bunch of foreigners in. Then the Greeks show up and try to make everyone Greek. After them, there's a forceful Jewish conquest. And then, topping it all off, the Iron Fist of Rome. We're talking centuries of constant, violent change. It's no wonder Isaiah called it Galilee of the Gentiles. And this history wasn't just in books, it was literally carved into the landscape. Take the cliffs of Arbel. I mean, just look at them. The historian Josephus tells this horrific story about Herod the Great cornering Jewish rebels hiding in the caves right there. He had his soldiers lowered in these giant cages, and they would just drag people out and slaughter them. Whole families. This was a place of deep, deep trauma. It was a literal land of the shadow of death. And this is where the story gets absolutely wild, because Isaiah's prophecy didn't just say a light would shine in the darkness, it also said that from this exact same region, a Prince of Peace would show up. I mean, can you imagine the irony? A message of ultimate peace born from one of the most violent, fought-over pieces of land in the entire ancient world. It's just stunning. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. We're going to leave the big, sweeping history and head into the very hills where Jesus grew up, because it's here that we find another piece of the puzzle, one that's kind of been hiding in plain sight this whole time. So let me ask you a question. What if I told you there was this huge, powerful Roman city? I'm talking the capital of Galilee, just an hour's walk from Nazareth, a city Jesus would have known like the back of his hand. But it is never, not once, mentioned in the Bible. Well, that city was Sepphoris, and during Jesus' childhood, it was a massive construction site. Herod's son was rebuilding it into this lavish showpiece. Now, Joseph was a tekton, which means a builder, a stonemason. It is almost certain that he and a young Jesus would have walked there for work. I mean, they would have been surrounded by Roman buildings, Roman culture, and, this is super important, a big Roman theater. So why does a theater matter? Well, think about one of the words Jesus uses all the time to criticize the religious leaders. He calls them hypocrites. You know, that Greek word, hypocrites, it literally means an actor. It's someone who wears a mask on a stage. For the people listening to him, people who lived right next door to Sepphoris, this wasn't some fancy metaphor. It was a direct, powerful cultural gut punch. He was using their own world to expose their world. All right, from the hills where he grew up, we're now following Jesus as he moves his home base down to the heart of the region, the Sea of Galilee. And just like everything else we've seen, this was no quiet, peaceful lake. Nope, it was a total cauldron of activity, both natural and human. You've heard the stories, right? About the sudden storms that just terrified the disciples on their boat? Well, those storms are a direct result of the crazy geography there. You get this cool, wet air from the Mediterranean, and it gets funneled through these valleys. When that cool air slams into the super dense, warm air sitting over the sea, which is way below sea level, the result is explosive. In fact, the Greek word Matthew uses for one of these storms is seismos. Yeah, the same word we get seismic from. It didn't just feel like a storm. It felt like an earthquake on the water. And Capernaum itself, the town Jesus called home, let's get one thing straight. It was not some quiet, sleepy fishing village. Not even close. It was a border town, right on a major highway between two different political territories. That made it a buzzing hub for business, for travel, and, you guessed it, for collecting taxes. So when Jesus calls Matthew the tax collector, he's not off in the middle of nowhere. he is setting up his headquarters in a strategic, busy, and really important spot. The whole area was also a center for industry, especially for olive oil. And archaeologists have found tons of these all over Capernaum, huge olive presses. And the key part is the millstone. We're talking about a massive, unbelievably heavy stone, often turned by a donkey, just to crush olives. It was an everyday object. Everyone knew exactly what it was and how heavy it was. And that's what makes this teaching so absolutely, terrifyingly real. When Jesus wanted to explain how serious it is to cause a child to sin, he didn't use some abstract idea. He pointed to the heaviest, most crushing object in their daily lives and said, "Imagine that tied around your neck." Then he paired it with the terror of being thrown into the deep, chaotic sea. You'd never forget that image, precisely because it was ripped straight from the world you saw every single day. Okay, but all this brings us to one of the most difficult parts of the whole story. It's a paradox, really. The very places that saw the most light, the most teaching, the most miracles, they seem to be the ones who wanted it the least. So what you're seeing here is this really tragic situation in what people call the unbelieving triangle of Capernaum, Chorazin, and Bethsaida. This little area was the absolute epicenter of Jesus' work. The number of miracles they saw, off the charts. The teachings they heard, constant. And yet, their response, overwhelmingly negative. It's a hard lesson. Just being close to the light doesn't mean you're going to accept it. And you can just feel Jesus' frustration, his heartbreak, really. He lays into them with this woe to you, saying that even famously wicked pagan cities would have repented if they'd seen what these towns saw. And the line about Capernaum, his own adopted hometown, it's just brutal. You will go down to the depths. Wow. It's an incredible statement about the human heart's ability to see something amazing and still just walk away. Okay, for the last leg of our journey, Jesus takes his disciples on a road trip, way up north to the very edge of their world. He leads them to a place where all the competing ideas of the day, all the different gods and powers, are going to collide in one big, unforgettable moment. And that place was Caesarea Philippi. This place was the polar opposite of Jewish life. It was a major center for pagan worship. It had a giant cave dedicated to the Greek god Pan, all these little shrines to other gods carved into the rock, and, to top it all off, a shining white marble temple where you're supposed to worship Caesar himself as a god. It's right here, standing against this literal backdrop of false gods and a man claiming to be a god, that Jesus asks the most important question in the world. Who do you say that I am? The location was not an accident. He deliberately set up this showdown, standing against all the claims of the world's religions and the power of the Roman Empire, to force a choice. And it's here, in this place, that Peter makes his famous confession, a radical statement of loyalty that was a direct challenge to every single idol and emperor in that valley. So as we've seen, the land of Galilee was never just a passive stage, right? Its violent past made the idea of a Prince of Peace that much more shocking. Its weird geography created the very storms that would test faith. Its everyday industries gave Jesus the perfect, gut-punch metaphors for his deepest truths, and its pagan borderlands became the perfect stage for the ultimate question of who he was. The land was an active character in the story, through and through. And what the story of the Galilee really reminds us is that our own context is never neutral. The places we live, our history, our culture, our daily routines, they all shape the stories we live out and the truths we're able to see. So that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. The land shaped this story. How does your landscape shape yours?